As we've been hearing on CBC News, the BC government has tabled legislation that would change the boundaries of provincial parks. The total area would also be increased by about 500,000 hectares. But land would also be removed from two already protected areas. One, to allow for the possible development of a sightseeing gondola at the Swiftwater Chief Provincial Park, and the other is to allow for environmental assessment to begin on a hydroelectric project in northwestern BC. We do want to hear from you on this. Should park boundaries be allowed to be altered? You can phone us at 1-800-825-5950 or 604-669-3733, the cell phone star or pound 690, or tweet us at BC Almanac. Environment Minister Terry Lake tabled this legislation, and we reached him about half an hour ago, and I began by asking him about Swiftwater's chief gondola proposal and if it's ever a good idea to take land out of a Class A provincial park.
Well, it's important to understand what we're doing, and this is a small corridor of land, as I said, about 2.6 hectares, and that allows the construction of 7 gondola towers. And the area will still be in a protected area, so it will be still preserved in terms of its conservation values. And this is to allow increased access to the area, and for people that have mobility issues that simply don't have the ability to get out and hike and climb the way others might, this provides a great opportunity for those people to enjoy the views that are available. And of course, this is a world-class area in terms of attracting people from tourists from around the world, and it supports those tourism jobs. We've had lots of local support as well as First Nation support. And of course, the proponent will have to now apply for a park use permit, so we will be going through a further process before this can happen.
As the Minister of the Environment, though, do you not have concerns about the integrity of a park being chopped up this way, altering the classification of that entire ecosystem?
Well, I think we have to put it into perspective, and yesterday we announced 550,000 hectares being put into parks and protected areas. Here we're talking about 2 hectares that essentially will still be protected, and it will just allow for these towers to be constructed, which will actually increase the use of that park. We want to get more people into our Class A parks. This particular park, through its planning process in the mid-90s, was designated as a park whose main objective was recreation. So it's a little bit different when you have a park whose main objective is conservation or wilderness values versus one that we designate as having a high value for recreation. This fits in with that management plan, and so we think it's a great idea to get people in the park to be able to enjoy it and make it more available to more British Columbians and more visitors from around the world.
And to those who have followed the development of BC parks over the last 100 years and have seen parks added, have also seen parks whittled away and other uses within them, what would you say to them, though, about the concern of altering this idea of a protected area?
Well, I'd like to see the evidence that any parks have been whittled away or altered, because we have grown the park system tremendously over the last 10 years. In fact, we now have close to 15% of the land base under protected areas, whether they're parks, protected areas, wildlife management areas. And so we have a huge percentage of this province that is protected in those various ways, far higher than what the United Nations, for instance, recommends, which is 12% of the land base. So I would challenge anyone who says that we are whittling away parkland. In fact, we have constantly added more and more. This is to increase the recreational values, to increase opportunities for tourism, and to get people into parks. And I think when you look at the different types of parks and the different values we have for those parks, some are clearly recreational. You look at Cultus Lake, for instance, Alice Lake. These are highly sought-after recreational opportunities. When we have conservancies or parks, for instance, Wells Gray up in my neck of the woods, there's still recreational opportunities, but the high values there are conservation values. So I think you can distinguish between the different types of parks and what people expect to get from those parks.
We have, 2 weeks left in the legislature. Why introduce this now? Critics are worried there hasn't been enough public discussion about this.
Well, don't forget, Mark, that this has gone through 2 public hearings, the municipality of Squamish and the regional district. It has enjoyed local support at both of those meetings. The proponent has done a lot of communication on this. And it is it meets the test in terms of the park planning process that this park underwent previously. So, I think there has been adequate ability for people to know about this project. We've, as I said, got First Nation support, we've got local government support, we've got business support, and many people of the general public support it as well. So, I think when you have that level of support, then I think it tells you that it's the right thing to do. But again, we still have some process to go through before this is going to happen.
And just a final question on the future of other proposals like this. What's the criteria that's applied to have private operators go into a provincial park?
Well, the operation itself, the main parts of the operation are not in the park. The only part that is in the park are the towers that would support the gondola. But, we do provide those opportunities. Again, the use has to fit the characteristics of the park and the values of the park that have been identified through a planning process. So we're not going to put in high, intense uses in a park that has conservation values as its major objective. It has to suit the type of park, and of course parks closer into urban areas where you're going to see that more recreational values would be more suited to this type of operation than one that's more wilderness oriented and has high conservation values.
But Run of River is okay in those wilderness areas?
Well, the Run of River project in the Conservancy there's only 62 hectares that will be affected, and that's a marked reduction in the original plan. And we were directed by the courts through an appeal process to make this accommodation with the First Nations proponent that is involved in this particular project. Again, it has to go through a full environmental assessment, which will include a very high level of public consultation. So again, if it doesn't meet that test, then that land will go back into the Conservancy.
Minister Lake, thanks for taking our call right now.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
BC's Environment Minister Terry Lake, and we'd like to hear from you. Should park boundaries be altered or be allowed to be altered? 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. We're setting aside the next dozen minutes or so, and Gwen Barlee is joining us as well, the Policy Director of the Wildlife Society, and she is with me online. Good afternoon, Gwen.
Good afternoon.
Also, David Greenfield. He is a principal with the Sea to Sky Gondola Corporation, which hopes to build that sightseeing gondola near the Chief. And David, welcome to BC Almanac.
Good afternoon, Mark and Gwen.
How excited, David, are you about this legislation and how it opens the door for you to make your application?
Well, Mark, it's been a very long process, and we worked very hard throughout the last 2 years on this thing, and so we're absolutely excited and eager to hopefully get a positive decision and so that we can kind of get on with the project.
And what's a brief description for people of what you want to be able to do there on the Chief?
Well, for one thing, the segment led off with the introduction that this is a gondola up the Squamish Chief, and that's incorrect. It's actually a gondola that starts in an old gravel parking lot at the base right beside the highway that sits in between the two parks, and it rises up the Haybrick Ridge to a previously logged area up on in the Shannon Creek drainage, where there's a nice plateau and a beautiful overlook to see the Howe Sound. But it is not a gondola up the Squamish Chief.
It gives you a view of the Chief and the Shannon Falls, essentially, but you require the land designation within the park to be changed, right?
Yeah, there's a corridor of land, as Mr. Lake pointed out, that is required for 7 gondola towers to be placed, and those are within the Squamish Chief Provincial Park area.
And Gwen, what's your biggest concern about that?
Well, the biggest concern is parks were created to be protected from development pressures. And we don't believe, as an environmental organization, that land should be taken out of parks, particularly Class A parks, for commercial or development purposes. And then another big red flag for us is this is a provincial park, and BC Parks is in charge of managing these parks, but BC Parks has not had a public consultation on this proposal, and that's a big concern because of the precedent it sets for other parks.
The minister did say that there had been 2 public hearings, regional district and the municipality, that there is lots of local support for this. So what about that kind of consultation?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about the Squamish City Council and the regional district, their mandate isn't to protect parks in British Columbia. That's the mandate of BC Parks. And so we would say when you have a developer asking to have land deleted from a provincial park, a Class A provincial park, that the onus is on BC Parks to have an impartial public process where people in the area and down to Vancouver can have a say, that we're worried about the precedent this sets, that these are public parks, they aren't the parks of the BC Liberals, that they're public parks and the public have a say, should have a say in how they're managed. And again, we don't believe, the Wilderness Committee doesn't believe that land should be taken out of a Class A park for commercial purposes.
David Greenfield, as someone who wants to do just that, well, what's your response to Gwen?
Well, we've undergone an incredible amount of public consultation. We started back in June of last year. We probably held over 100 meetings with various interest groups, community groups, dozens of open houses. We've been in all of the media and radio, TV, and newspaper. There's been lots of notification for a lot of those events. And so we've actually been complimented on the extensive nature of the public consultation we've had, and it's, I guess, we felt we've done a very good job in trying to reach out to the public, because we always felt that it was very important to make sure that there was broad-based public support for this project. And obviously, most of the concentration of that effort has been within the region. But then again, I think that that's not atypical for how the public processes are typically run for projects. I mean, they tend to focus, I think, within the regional context, because that's where a lot of the stewardship for the lands and the areas are done. And we approached all of the groups who we felt would potentially be impacted or have some opinions on this, and so. We felt we'd done a very good job in terms of reaching out, and we would have hoped that anyone who had any kind of passion or interest in this area would have, caught light or heard about this and been able to provide their input throughout the process.
Let's hear what our listeners are saying about this. It's a larger principle that is important for all the province, the idea of opening up parks to private development. What do you think of that? And the number to reach us, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950, star or pound 690 on the cell phone. Let's go to Parksville on the island. Rhonda, your thoughts, please.
Well, I thoroughly agree with everything that Gwen Barlee said. And I am a tour operator, actually, and I think I noticed that we're really not maintaining the provincial parks, even Class A parks, as we did in the past. And Cathedral Grove, Macmillan Park, their trails that were a couple of footbridges were blown out by the Cameron River overflowing, and that was about 5 years ago, and those trails still are not open. And here on the east side of Vancouver Island, where most of the population on Vancouver Island is on the east coast, we are not even equal to the rest of the province with protected areas, provincial parks. We only have 2%, whereas the mainland has 12 or 13%. Before we start messing around and altering boundaries of provincial parks, could we please look after the ones we have and increase parks rather than start tearing at their boundaries? Cathedral Grove, Macmillan Park should have a buffer between the park and the private managed forest land, and it does not. And that park is very threatened. Its longevity, its future, as all of us local people can see what's happening there. And now with island timberlands now logging even the fire breaks. So I see us going very much backwards in many, many ways.
Okay, Rhonda, we're getting the message loud and clear, and look after what we have already. And let's continue to hear from our listeners on what's happening here. Gary on Galiano Island next. Hello, Gary.
Hello.
What do you think about allowing a development like the gondola, which wouldn't actually go up the face, but would require land within the park to be used for the towers?
Well, this is another example. I support all the ideas that people have come up with just now in the recent phone calls. But this is another example of valuable public good going for a private profit. And I don't blame the proponent for this. I blame the government who's doing this all over with everything. BC Parks on Galiano has a lot of land, and it's very poorly managed, in some cases completely unmanaged, unattended, going to Broome. Fragmenting ecosystems, why, for what? So people can carry out what I would call sitting tourism. Get those tourists off their feet and on their bums. What is that about? I mean, and then I hate
it's about providing access for some people who perhaps can't climb up the chief. What about that?
And, really, I'm sure disabled people could use the money that would be spent on this for a lot of much more fundamental needs than access via gondola to a viewpoint. I think the disabled should be asked about this, but with my perspective in mind, because often it's like the consultation that went on. Unless people are really made alert, there's so much going on that we're struggling against between pipelines and clear cutting and so on in this province. It's absolutely a kind of an environmental kind of disaster that we're waging a war against.
Okay, we're going to have to move on because of the time constraints. And I do want to hear from our guest one more time as well, David Greenfield from Sea to Sky Gondola and Gwen Barlee from the Wildlife Committee. Let's go to, let me see now, are we going to Jeff in Squamish? Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm okay. What do you think of a gondola at the base of your community?
Hugely in favor of it. The proponents have done an incredible job with community consultation. I work with youth in the outdoors, and I think one of the biggest thing that we try and do is when we're bringing them up from other environments is we want to expose them to these incredible environments, and by exposing them and giving them access to it, the appreciation and respect for those environments increases dramatically. And I think one thing that we need to keep in context here is that this is the portion where the gondola towers are going to be, which is within the park. It's 7 towers. It's not coming out of parkland. It's being reclassified. And my analogy I continue to picture in my head is riding the gondola up Whistler Mountain in the summer. Underneath the gondola, you see bears and wildlife flowing back and forth underneath that. This is not a fence that is going up. This is just clearing for 7 pads, and the park will, this is not taking anything away from the park. I think it's adding to it.
Okay, Gwen Barlee, what about what he's pointing to?
Well, what I would say, the gondola might be a perfectly acceptable project, but there's concerns because it's going to be 7 towers within a provincial park, and that land's going to be removed from the park, and that's the BC government's own words in their press release yesterday. And surprisingly, this is a public park, it's a provincial park, but BC Parks has engaged in no public consultation, and the proponent has engaged in public consultation. But that's not impartial consultation, that's a proponent that wants to get a project up and running. And we need BC Parks to step up to the plate and engage the public, and they haven't done so, and that's very surprising.
David Greenfield, would you encourage parks to do that?
Well, you know what I mean? We've been trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I mean, this has been a very tough and arduous process, and I have to say that BC Parks has not been easy on their requests and their requirements. I mean, we've gone to all of the groups they've asked us to sort of consult with, who they would classify as sort of the known groups that would be interested in something like this, and so we've really done a lot of work. And so, I feel like it would be really squeezing the orange very, very, very hard now to try and eke out any more kind of public comment than we've already gone out to get.
Well, what about a broader public consultation, though, through Parks that's impartial because of the precedent that Gwen has pointed to that she worries about?
Well, you know what? What's very interesting in all of the public processes that we've gone through that, that are formal in nature with the District of Squamish or the Regional District, it's always been about the full project. And, it's never been focused on just the base or just the top. And so, it's always been known that this has been going through the park, and people have been free and able to comment on this, as a whole. And so I guess we really do believe that there has been really broad-based public consultation on this.
No more required.
Really, I mean, in our humble opinion, I think we've done a pretty good job, probably, and we've been complimented many times about how much public consultation we've done on this. So,
well, thank you for coming on our program today, both of you.
My pleasure.
Great, thank you.
Take care. David Greenfield, he is with Sea to Sky Gondola Corporation. Gwen Barlee, Policy Director for the Wilderness Committee.